Or
Feel free. We'll listen. All right. So I'm Alan. I teach in Typhoon. I know most of you, but not everyone.
And I'm Emily. I'm in Monsoon, which is the other island studio.
So we're both in a program right now with CGMS, the Center for Guided Montessori Studies. And one of the projects that we have chosen to take on through this training for secondary education is just the effects of technology on the teenage brain and the effects on adolescents in general, their social interactions. We're going to start off talking a little bit about just Montessori philosophy and what Maria Montessori believes to be true about the development of the brain and about how we all grow. We are not necessarily trying to convince you to think a certain way. We both have some pretty strong beliefs, however, so that may come across. We're open to debate. We're open to friendly conversation. Mostly, though, this is about brainstorming. We just want to hear what are things that you are dealing with. Full disclosure, I have an 18-year-old. She's off in the world in Arizona, so she's dealing with her own technological habits. My suggestions to you would be to have kids 10 years apart so that the one that's much younger, we got him all figured out. Poor guy doesn't stand a chance. Yeah, so we're just going to talk about some development. Do you want to add to that?
No, I mean, I think, of course, like you said, we certainly have opinions about what we would like the prepared environment to look like for adolescents, but we're also well aware that we're dealing with a culture and a world that isn't necessarily what we think is best in our heads. And so I think this is more about the discussion of balance, both for your learner and for yourself, because that's reality. They know how to do more than I'll ever know how to do, mostly because I don't want to practice, but yes.
So, the planes of development, how many of you can say you started here and you developed a steady path to arrive where you are right now? Everybody, right? There were no hiccups, no bumps, no ups and downs. So in the Montessori world, we have 4 defined planes, and then above that, we'll show you in a different graphic what happens. But the red planes here are the creative planes. And this is the time of
tumultuousness!
explosive growth.
I really love the red planes because it is where you start to see all sorts of movement, that 0 to 6, or 0 to 3, 3 to 6. They're absorbing and they're exploring and they're kind of little and it's adorable. And then you actually see the same thing at 12 to 15, which is a little less adorable sometimes, but it's the same creative learning how to become oneself.
You can see that the red planes are divided, or it may be harder to see in the back. But the reason that they are set up as triangles, they tend to start off with a time of real growth and then preparation for that next plane, that consolidation. And we'll use that word a few times. But there is very much analogous behavior between those two. And I think, if you want me to show the next one.
Yeah, well, I do want to just say that the blue ones, that 6 to 12, so maybe your learner is at the end of that, getting ready to move up, or at the beginning of that, and you're kind of seeing them calm a little. These are periods where the information begins to consolidate, and the learning kind of happens, and there's kind of a settling period, and they can really kind of settle themselves, and then it starts upheaving again, like you can see with the arrows. So I think it's important just to sort of visualize, oh, they just seem so calm all of a sudden. Actually, there's some science behind that. So. Technological
That's right,
breakdown.
technology.
I was so
Get that.
Okay, I'll do that.
impressed by what you were doing on your own.
It's great until it doesn't work.
Is it great?
Right. Nothing. We lose it?
There it is.
So this is a graphic from Maria Montessori, a talk that she gave in 1951. So this is after she settled in with the triangles. And you can see that 0 to 3, think about all the growth that happens there. The language acquisition and learning that we have fingers. learning how to roll over, to suddenly speaking, and some of them reading. And before too much longer, they're riding bikes and falling on their heads, and all these things that can happen. And then 6 to 12, sort of not linear, but certainly more steady growth. The consolidation of all of that chaos. And then she puts in there, we have this next set of huge changes, and it's not just physical, although we see that part of it, where they were here, and now they're here. I notice that a lot because I'm taller than everyone when they come into my age, here at 12 to 14. I'm not taller than everyone when they leave.
I'm not taller than any of them either.
You're short of the floor, you're short of
That's right. And one of my favorite parts about this particular image, and I prefer it over the triangles, is because it's a bulb. And so when we really talk about Montessori education, our whole goal, while it is academic, it's really about growing a human life. And Montessori says that a lot, that our goal is to grow a life, to grow a human. And so the concept of the bulb really reminds us that we start as this thing, and that we have to nurture as we go, and that we kind of evolve in our growth.
So kids in the third plane, how do they present? If you've been around teenagers, would you observe, say that sometimes the character is unsteady?
Sometimes it's steady.
Yeah. And what if you're a teen? How do you feel all the time? Do you always feel like you've got it together? You woke up in the morning, you know what's going to happen, and you never have a hiccup in how you feel? Susanna's looking at me. She knows that's not a real thing, right? Like they know for themselves they feel tumultuous.
When we think back to our own teenage years, we were into heavy metal one month, and we're into, if you're Glenn, into ghetto rap the next month. And we're trying. That's right. Constantly trying on different hats. And so what may appear to be unsteady character is really, literally trying on some different hats there. Just trying to figure out who we are. And we'll come back to it over and over again. The work of the adolescent, work of the child is to become an adult. They're trying to figure out what adult are they going to be.
When we talk about the planes of development, that first plane, that early birth to 6, is really just learning how, and you might have to help me a little bit with the words, learning how to do or learning how to see. And then you kind of move into this, I can do it, I want to practice it. And then when we get to this third plane of development, we use the term, I can be it. I want to be it. And so we have to practice what we want to be in order to become it. And so I may want to be this thing. How do I begin to practice that thing? And this is the desire for independence, but it also leads to this emotional sensitivity because I don't get it right on the first time all the time. And it's hard to learn how to become. And that's really what we're dealing with when we talk about the third plane adolescent.
And for us, that can be hard because the physical growth is happening. I expect you to be consistent. I expect you to behave more like an adult because you are in an adult's body. And you're not always there. You're not trained right. It doesn't happen like that. So what they need trust. They need safety. They need support from us, for sure. They need opportunities for self-expression. We offer that in many ways here, especially through the occupations programs, through our expressions programs. These are our real-world examples where we're interacting with one another face-to-face.
They also need the opportunity for some boundaries and some examples of how to become. And so it becomes our job and our work as parents, staff members, and just adults in the community to offer parameters that are healthy and then allow them to explore within those parameters.
Because ultimately what they want to do is contribute, just like we do. We sit down and collaborate. We just had a big staff meeting, and we can speak up and we feel valued because our voices are heard. They want that too. They need that practice and that support. So they want genuine, purposeful, civil membership in a group. Sounds awesome, right? Just that. It's easy. But then we throw in some speed bumps or some technologies or some things that maybe we can't keep track of or we can't keep up with. So this is Maria Montessori in the formation of man. This didn't come out last week. The real enemy is man's impotence against his own products. It's the arrest of the development of humanity itself. Do any of you as parents feel like the horse is out of the gate already? Like the technology is moving faster than you are, or faster than you can keep up with? I feel like that, personally. Flynn, do you feel that way? You have to manage this, right, for the team?
I secretly get them to think I'm at equal level, which I know. When I was in the Coliseum stays in the Coliseum. No, it is incredible how much we learn with them along their own journey of figuring things out.
I think the important part of this quote is to consider that we have the capacity as humans to develop these products, which is phenomenal and awesome and outstanding. And then in what ways does it keep us from actually realizing on that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, our ultimate needs, our self-actualization?
And to be clear, we don't really have issues with the device. This is kind of magic. Right? It's fun to play around and go, oh wow.
You did that on purpose.
But if it replaces authentic interactions in the real world, then what does that do for what Montessori and her son defined as the human tendencies, the basic human tendencies that we're all born with? And how do we fulfill those needs that those tendencies are driving us toward? So the human tendencies as a review. We're all born, whereas Melanie with the baby. Tendency for activity, we have to move. Self-preservation seems obvious. And these all seem super obvious, but is activity obvious? Because we're taught nonstop that easier is better. That the opposite of activity is what we're having. Whether it's microwaves or self-driving cars, or I can just click this without getting up to move.
I can turn my heat on from here so that I'm warm when I go home, right? We don't have that. Some people.
Orientation, just knowing where we are in space. Exploration, some of us really have that need and act on it frequently, but we all have it. And to put things in order. Those, sometimes we can really associate with childhood. We can picture that. We do all of those things. What about the others though? Communication. We're communicating. You get the gist of what I'm saying, I hope, and the tone of what I'm saying. And you get it. We laugh appropriately as we play off of each other. We're face to face. But we can't really do that in the digital world so much. So there are barriers to communication. And also what we're hearing, what we're taking in.
One of the important things we were talking about as we were putting this presentation together is that while I can easily admit that technology is definitely something that's difficult for me, I also can look at these human tendencies and see ways that technology can really improve my ability to be a better human or a different kind of human, right? If I have impairments with communication, we have technology now that I can communicate or hear better or a knee that works now instead of having no leg, right? And also, kids here can now communicate with kids all the way across the world, and we can shrink our globe and be multicultural. In some ways that can be really positive, and then there are all of these fallbacks from that as well. So I think what's important is that we look at these human tendencies, how can we use technology to support growing some of them, and then deciding where we have to scale back to improve some of them without technology as well.
The fact that we can go to class tomorrow morning with folks in East Swatini is phenomenal.
It's just that it's at 6:30 in the morning because that time difference doesn't change but you can still talk to people all the way in East Swatini. That's cool.
So again, it's not the device, it's not the technology itself, but what's available there. And abstraction and imagination, how's the imagination being used, especially for the adolescent? I cannot tell you how many times, I would say almost daily, that I overhear conversations that are about headshots and shrapnel. are the conversations they're having. That's the imagination that we're using. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but that seems antithetical to peace education, the goal of Montessori education. We'll talk a little bit about the difference between perfection. We have concentration, repetition, self-perfection. Self-perfection is not perfectionism. Those are different things. To perfect a craft means that we're working on something to get better at it, and we can do that over and over again. How much self-perfection do we get, or how much exactness and precision is required if we can just start the game over? We can start with 3 lives. Is that really valuable? Is it something that we put a lot of time into? I'm working on a wood project now. I've got a lot of time and effort and energy and money into it, and I mess it up. That hurts. If I'm playing a game with a bunch of friends and I fall off, I get killed. All right, see you tomorrow.
And I think this goes into the idea of concentration and repetition and communication as well. The actual thing, the way I'm going to communicate about it with more tenderness or love or affection or connection, and some of the ways that we communicate on social media or games, and any of you guys who have done any research on that know about all of this sort of underhanded commentary that goes on there. Is that authentic communication? Is that really improving upon these human tendencies?
So the fictitious universe then, if we talk about video games or we talk about online communities, can become an escape. The opposite of authentic communication. Whether we fall back on sarcasm or we violent conversations or just that desensitivity to what it means for me to sit next to you and make eye contact. That's a different thing. Something is lost when we communicate with each other. One of Montessori's quotes here, as you read this over, we just believe that they form their own consciousness through their interaction with their environment. So what is that environment that they're interacting with? Is it founded upon violence? Is the foundation of it, one of her words, deviant?
So I think it's important at this second just to ask yourself, what does your environment at home look like? And what do you try to nurture in your own home? And I would venture to say that a lot of us would like to assume that we're creating an environment that has love, or we spend time together, or we want to do these activities together. So that's one environment, but what other environments are your learners being exposed to that you can't necessarily control, or that don't support that world? Just as a thought.
I'm interested in just hearing some feedback about opportunities for contributing for adolescents and what you've seen either in your community or in your household or sports teams or what opportunities are you finding? Because they don't have the mall, right? The mall's not a thing really like it was for us.
Right. And so I just read this thing about Iceland, and they had the highest drinking rate, alcohol consumption rate of teenagers, right? And so they tried intervention, like talking and interventions and all that stuff, and that didn't increase it. And so then they studied teenagers that didn't drink, and they found that they hung out with their family more, and they had extracurricular activities. And so the country gave every family stipends, and then they built places for kids to go and use those stipends. So they built like YMCA type places where it would be like everybody went, like where the teens would go, and they built skating rinks and all sorts of things for kids to actually go. And I mean, that is the main thing I've noticed with my kids. It's like they hang out at my house, and they're like, they all come over there, because like where else are they gonna go,
How many of you guys feel like your kids hang out with others less than you would have expected or less than you did at your age?
Yeah.
Okay, but they are hanging out in a way, because they are together on their phone.
They're literally hanging. I mean,
Yeah.
but Sophie doesn't. Like, she's virtually hanging out where the game is really, there are people at my house, humans.
And that's just a difference of 3 or 4 years with that.
But they don't, it's like where do you, like, she'll be like, where do you, when I go to the mall, I'll be like, no.
Why would you say no? Did you hang out at the mall? How many of you guys hang out at the mall?
I know, I
Yeah.
did, I really did.
I did too.
It's like a anti-consumerism thing for me, and say, you know, come on, there's got to be something else to do. But really, they, you know, and now you can't even do that. Like, you can't take them to the mall anymore, so, past 4 o'clock. You know, so now they've started, some of them will meet us in the coffee shops and stuff. But it's like, you know, there are limited choices for them to go, a place to go in the evening, like 7 o'clock on Friday night, where businesses are happy to see them, you know? I mean, it's a real thing.
Better go to trampoline parks.
Yeah, but then you're paying $20 an hour, right?
An hour, yeah.
Go ahead, what were you gonna say?
Well, it's interesting because the connection that they have to each other virtually now, it sort of eliminates the need to go meet somewhere.
Yeah.
So people get really lazy about it. So in our house, we have a mandated FaceTime, like physically in front of somebody FaceTime at least once a week. Spend time in person with your friends. And we had a conversation, and we have teens in our house all the time. So the other teens get involved in these conversations, but they also, they're weird. I don't know, we're in it anyway. And it's been really healthy for them to have that mandated because they see each other in a different light. Everybody leaves happier. They come
You
in
can't really
happier.
tell nonverbal cues, right? Like I can pick up on your nonverbal cues when we're right in a space, and with this lack of a physical space to be
And
in,
they have to practice it because being a teenager is weird and awkward, and how do we navigate the social stuff? And if they have the comfort of their keyboard in whatever form, even if it's voice over a computer, there's an element of security in that that doesn't get challenged unless they are face to face with somebody. So it's interesting to see, but they find that they're more fulfilled. They don't necessarily have language for it, but observing, you know, or willingness to admit it, but observing how they feel at the end of that is really cool to observe.
And the virtual communication encourages passivity, right? Which, if we believe that those are the basic human tendencies, number one is activity. So, go ahead.
Sure, well, I mean, FaceTime, like, you don't have to compromise, I mean, like, there's not all the messy stuff you have to figure out in a real interaction. So, like, you can FaceTime for an hour, but you still don't have to figure out, like, when you have a friend over.
she meant like real FaceTime.
I
not
know,
FaceTime. Oh,
yeah, but I'm saying, yeah, like,
Yeah, like
there's,
even visually
there
or virtually in the screen, that's what I'm saying.
there are things you have to figure out when you're with another person, you know, like, when do you let them decide? When do you know, I mean, just all the things you gotta know how to do.
And I'll just interject quickly, just as an aside, the idea of silence. With technology always at the ready, there's not that time for reflection. We fill every silent moment. We notice it in here. If we just wait more than 3 seconds for an answer, someone's got to say something. You've got to fill that silence. It's uncomfortable. And self-reflection is super important for the development of that consciousness. So they socialize, they contribute in virtual worlds. Another Montessori quote, mankind is vanquished and enslaved by its own environment because it's remained weak in comparison with that environment.
1900, right?
Very timely.
Yeah.
So we have this new environment that's being created. It seems to be growing faster than our capacity to handle it. And also, you know, these worlds, we create them, there are dangers to explore around every corner.
You're always on high alert. Your adrenaline's, you know, peaked all the time.
And we can be the hero over and over and over and over again. Really, it seems exciting. There's a lot going on. But the virtual world is really not prepared for the purpose of social moral and spiritual development. It's exciting. There's always something to do.
So how is that different from the ways that we used to seek adrenaline, where people would play sports or go hunting or climb mountains or ultra marathoning, you know, there's a lot of ways that people have always sought adrenaline.
Sure.
And so the seeking of the adrenaline is not new, it's just
Right.
the way that
It's a human
doing it.
tendency,
So-
really, that need for movement and activity and order.
Because one of the things I will say, it is similar. They can talk to each other, they join teams, they meet up at certain times, they're out there, but they're not.
They develop a tribe.
They're on their couch.
Yeah.
And they're in their room. And it was way more to the brain science part of it. But as mammals, we are wired to notice quick movements. And that's why for little babies, TV is really bad. Because something might eat us, and if it's going to eat us, it's not going to come straight on, it's going to come from over here. So we're alert to that stimulus. But if that stimulus is always right in front of us, we don't have to wire the brain in any certain way to react to it. It's all right there, we're right there, we're right there, we're right there. So that's part of it.
And when you look at these, the amount of stimuli in a single flash is so apparent, it's so there all the time, it's hard to take their eyes away from it. Something I've observed over the 14 years of working with this age level is that while the kids haven't changed that much, their need for visual stimuli has changed over that amount of time because they are so much more bombarded. I don't know if it's the light, I'm not a scientist, that's anecdotal observation, right? But they are stimulated constantly by visual. It is very difficult for them to look at a page, like paper or a book. They would prefer to read on a computer, even because of that fast movement, the light behind it. And so I think our bodies become adjusted to what we become used to. And so this offers a ton of stimuli and sets off those same triggers because naturally, biologically, our body is asking for those triggers. And if it's this easy to get, I mean, a lot of these games you don't even pay for them. You don't even know if they can just get on and download them.
I wonder if that will play out. It doesn't with Jackson, but he may have Asperger's, but he can be, maybe because of that or his ADHD, he can be as glued to a book as something like that. However, I think his interest might be restricted to fast food, action sort of stuff. That may change as well. But I don't yet see a correlation between that idea of moving to the printed page versus the screen. The content may be.
That's helpful. Yeah. So it seems like it's kind of that sensitive period right now as to what he'll be more drawn toward.
And he will be equally as hooked on a book as the reader. He wants both.
Okay, so more information.
Yeah,
Does that accompany with movement? Is there movement accompanied with those things, or just?
That's
that would be
all.
like a- Yeah.
Yeah, like it.
Thanks for sharing.
So another way that is different, if I went to baseball practice over and over and over and over again and accomplished something, I contributed to something that I felt valorized through my own actions, my own contributions to that team. And I can meet up with folks online, we can do this over and over and over again, but is that really me? Or is it my avatar, my online persona? And I have the added bonus, or negative, of being anonymous if I want to. So if I'm not good at it, that wasn't me anyway. And I think in those ways it's very different. Because they want authentic contribution. They want to feel like they're really a part of something. And then becoming adults, when they can work with someone who is here with them, can show them the way, we can welcome them into that adulthood. Maybe not so much here.
Well, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, and then consequences of actions. So when you're anonymous like us, it's easy to skip out on consequences if you do that. But another thing just about technology in general, we create all these things, but it's not like any group is sitting and organizing like, what do we want humanity to be, and let's create the products or tools to create the best humanity possible. Right now it's to do this or that. And it's one of the problems I see with that versus the other types of adrenaline seeking. It's super violent. And, it's something that I felt a lot of those things when I was a kid, and I can't stand probably now. Just because I don't like violence. But it's your enmeshed meshed and that becomes a set point. You know, that's a normal thing, and I don't think that's healthy to, and you mentioned in the beginning, the headshot. It's like that should be kind of horrifying.
Shrapnel.
Anyway,
I hear somebody
because-
conversation about shrapnel.
because in the real life, war is not pretty, and it's awful, and it's painful.
And how many of us as parents would say, go out and shoot some things, go out and steal a car, go out and do these things. The things that they're encouraged to do oftentimes on these are either illegal or violent or what Montessori would call TV.
I think this is really easy to look at and attack a picture like this. I think we also have to pull back and say that it's not just this. Because while I'm going to be stereotypical right now, I'm throwing that out there, not all the population is playing this. We also have a whole another group of the population who are on things like Instagram, and the photos become the thing that we're going to aspire to be. Or the undertone, and I think Facebook is out for teens now. You guys just Instagram and Snapchat, is that the thing? Where you can have something up for like 5 seconds. I mean, I've hung out with teens, not you guys, but like outside of, and like literally every 3 seconds you're like, you know, like how many faces of your tongue can you possibly need to send that
Let's leave my
person?
daughter out of this.
Yes. But it's a reality, right? So it's this bombardment, and that also because then people are giving them feedback, whether it's a thumbs up or a like or whatever it is on Instagram or Snapchat or on social media. But whatever that feedback is very similar to this feedback. I belong to this tribe. I have 5,000 people following me. 4,321 of them liked it. I'm going to do another picture of my tongue out. And so it does give this inauthentic communication, even though it's a real picture of the real person, and the world is real, it's not this world, it really is no different. So we have to be cautious in both levels. It's not just the video games. We have to be aware of where the communication platform is happening, and if it's authentic enough to really support those human tendencies.
We'll be putting a blog post out on this topic later in the week, and we'll have a link in there to a documentary that we watched earlier this year called Being 13. If anyone had a chance to watch that, we'll link that up so that you can see, because they do a panel with these kids and they talk all about just what we were talking about. Sorry.
I guess it's hard for me to imagine how, so they don't hang out at the mall.
You're right.
This is the new mall.
This is your mall.
So,
That's terrifying.
I mean, I don't know how do you, how do I help encourage Emma to have a relationship with her friends and simultaneously take away the place where her friends are?
You're
It's like,
right.
have friends, but you can't go to the mall.
So how did it work out for you when you were a teen? Because I didn't have the internet.
Oh, I wasn't allowed to have friends.
Oh.
Yes, you have.
Does someone else want to? I mean, I think this is a really important question.
We try to invite kids over, and then you have to watch that they don't go and get on the video games together. You have to encourage them to do, think of something else to do. But we try to instill like some play dates. But what we find is, as soon I think as my son hit 12, none of the boys came outside anymore, unless they're like 11, 10, under. They don't come outside, and it's really hard to engage them to come outside.
Without feeling like you're nagging, which is exactly what you don't want to do. You want to pick the battles you want to fight, and this may not be the battle you want to fight tonight.
It's really interesting that I've seen like multiple pieces that are going into this. One is we look at kind of preparing, like having an environment that is conducive to allow kids to feel safe and hang out, because ever since the 60s and 50s, even adults do not socialize in a community-style method that they used to in the 50s and 60s. There's a book called Bowling Alone where they talked about the membership in social clubs and community clubs basically precipitously declined and is still in decline, and looking at that as a kind of representation of how we don't socialize the way that we used to. And then another thing too is that, kind of having some like historical, I used to hate history, now that's what we're like anymore. It's really weird. But when we think about technology, like that's technology, right? But in the 1800s, before Johann Gutenberg, the book was a piece of technology.
Absolutely.
And it was looked upon by the current society as being a gateway to all kinds of bad ideas.
Deviant behavior.
You'll read about
Right,
things and learn about ideas and who the heck, what will come of it. And it's usually because the social adjustment is typically about 1 to 2 generations behind the technology that comes before it. So it takes, when the radio comes out, it takes a generation or two for the people to figure out, okay, where does the radio fit in the grand scheme of the family? And Elvis, that's affected him, Elvis, that's right. I think we're right hip deep in the middle of this, and we don't know where we are because we have to move fast and break stuff. Companies that put this stuff together as a way to stimulate the human brain, and we don't really know where it's going yet. We kind of think we have ideas, and it's really challenging to kind of rein it in. But I think providing the environment because the public doesn't provide it for us as they used to. Like malls, consumerism used to provide it for us. We don't have it as much, and just having some sort of like this environment right here is very, very unique in that respect.
And that 2 to 3 generations was at the old rate of development.
Yes.
Now
yes.
that development is.
It's exponentially
Yeah.
growing.
It goes back to the quote that we saw first, that essentially, like, our ruin is the thing we create. Or is it? And then, like you said, it just takes catch-up time. And these worlds, one thing that I think we need to say, they're very compelling. Check it out.
Super compelling.
Who wouldn't want to do that? I want to fly. I have dreams about flying all the time. And so there's a real there's a lot of enticement. I don't know if that's a word, but it's very enticing to join these worlds and to be able to fly this or to have these 3D things.
Virtual reality.
Thank you. Virtual reality. And it's magical, and it's really like a human developed this. That is magical and really amazing. But what does it start to say about our own wonder? And we go back to what you said, right? Where it used to be that adrenaline or that connection to like, let's go climb a mountain or walk in the woods. Now, if you can't do that with people not jumping out at you, you're just like walking in the woods. It's boring. I don't want to do this. I want to stay inside. Riding my bike's not cool. Look what I can do. I can fight people,
So we have our own thoughts on ways to combat these things. And one of those sometimes is just put it away and be away from it for a while. To explore the things that are out there and make some sorts of connections. And it doesn't have to be in canyonlands. It doesn't have to be in the mountains, but it can be in the creek out by. My 7-year-old's favorite place to go is up in the mountains, just at Letty Walter Park, and get in the creek and climb the tree. And he'll spend hours just catching crawdads. And those days are like magic. When you look at all the other distractions that are around. And yes, he wants to get on the computer, he wants to look at this and look at that, or he'd rather go home and watch a TV show. I think being aware of the allure of these things ahead of time. Sorry if you have teenagers already. But just being aware that exists and offering those other opportunities and those other examples of ways that they can be together, not just with other people, but with things that move slowly. So there is time for reflection. Oh, it's called Letty Walter Park. It's just a basketball court there. Yeah, I mean, it's nothing special, but he loves just being in the water.
I just think that's so cool.
What's that?
So what are some ways that we can create authentic experiences? Because we're not fools. We know they're going to get online, and in some ways we do want to offer them this space as their new mall. Because we can't always have kids over at our house, or, we understand that becomes difficult. So what are some ways we can offer authentic experiences? So some ways that we try to do that, at least in our department, is things like theater, building, and then creating projects collaboratively. In asking your learners about what they do during the day and having that time so that they can actually reflect on the real life things they do, that at least helps to balance what they might now step into and offer them some real perspective, because these are the things that are going on outside of just the academic stuff rigor that we have. Dressing up in costume, taking your kids to a real play so that they see that slowly. There's so much community theater. Building something. If you want to re-landscape your backyard, allowing your kid to be invested in that and really having the the time to talk about moonshot thinking, like really throwing out all of the ideas, even if they're ridiculous in your head. You know, like my thing is I want a dip pool right in the backyard, just like dig a pool. We can easily do that, right? It's moonshot thinking, really. But having that conversation, and what would that take, and what would that look like, and let's go out with the tape measure, and even though we may not do it, just that process, and that takes time and investment from you guys, and that can't happen every day, but when can it happen? And what little parts can you start to celebrate, like on the way home? What is the most authentic thing you did today, or whatever?
Oh, he's gone. But you mentioned earlier about allowing them to feel real consequences. Sometimes it doesn't work. And so one of these discussions was all about we need to build this pergola in a certain way. And we thought this was going to happen, and it didn't work. And we thought we would be done 2 weeks ago. And instead, and I think that's real, when they have a chance to put in their work and get their own splinters and their own blisters and have things not work correctly, it does take time. And it takes patience because it's really easy. Again, faster is better, easier is better. I know how to do this. I could just go do this thing and it'll be ready at this time. Sometimes we have to be willing to accept their answers, even if it's not the answer that we thought it was going to be.
And allow them the opportunity to fail. I think that's a scary word sometimes, and especially you have to have a trusting relationship both with your learner and with a staff member if it happens here at school. Like sometimes we want them to fail just a little bit so that they can figure out how they can fix things for themselves, especially in these real world situations like this. You know, it's much easier to put some ingredients in a cup and put it in the microwave and have a brownie in 2 seconds. It's very different to try to figure out how to mix all of those ingredients and make a cake on your own. There are differences, and it's okay to fail, and laughing about it, and letting yourself make mistakes in front of your learners too. It's a super important part of learning how to become.
The result of that, I've made some mistakes, I messed these things up, I feel fine about it because I learned something from it. My value isn't based upon getting that pergola built at this time or making the brownies exactly right at that time. I also care less and less about those likes because I know how I feel about me. I don't need someone else to validate it.
Another part of creating authentic relationships and allowing people an opportunity to step away from these sort of fictitious worlds is the concept of mentoring. Well, I mean, this is pictures of my mentors. I mean, we have the opportunity at this school that our learners do as they get a little bit older, get to go out into the community and either be mentored or mentor others. That is kind of one of the platforms of Montessori education. That's the whole idea of the 3-year studio, or the 2-year in our case. Is that we have people who know more about something and people who don't know as much about something. That includes technology. Guys, I didn't send an email for a really long time. I had kids help me do that. If I need a spreadsheet done, I have somebody come help me do that with that. Because that's not something I know. So there can even be mentorship in this world. And so asking for that and allowing your learners spaces to mentor. If there are community programs, just things that can get them out in the real world. This is my favorite quote.
Boundaries. So they need support, they need safety. Every time we provide a boundary, we're providing safety. We let the kids know, adolescents, young adults, and we let them know that we notice something. We're letting them know that we care, that we're helping them create a safe space.
You know, we're going to talk about this, but the thirst for adrenaline, I imagine, especially as a young man, I remember, I drove with my daughter the other day through a neighborhood that at the time, when I was 16, I drove 80 miles an hour through high, and I couldn't even imagine doing that. I mean, I couldn't believe how I didn't die. I really didn't know. So I'm wondering, I'm sure you're going to talk about how that adrenaline tolerance or thirst matches up with very naturally, not as much with playing Stratego with the old man, but with wiping out 50 people on the street. But, there will be other ways to share. So you're going to talk about that.
Well, I think it's just really important to understand brain development, that the amygdala is really it's forming, it's super active during those adolescent times, and the frontal lobe isn't developed yet. And so demystifying that part, offering alternatives, we know there are going to be risky behaviors. That's part of being a human. And the more that you can have the conversations of how is that like reality, or how, I think the documentary Being 13 really talks about this a lot with the social media concept. What does that fill for you? And can you get that someplace else? I think we do have to have that conversation, because you're right, testosterone and all of those hormonal things play a role in that.
Just that the brain has improved it.
Yeah, and it won't be for a while. I think what our main thing was, how can we help to do exactly that? How can we help to set boundaries? And so this is something we both try to practice.
Yeah, consistency matters. Even something simple like no phones at the table. That's a start for some people. Others, phone at the table, I can't imagine, but it happens, right? Of course it happens. We might block off, get whole blocks of time where TVs are off. Most of the time our TV is off. We actually have it in a little cupboard even, so you can't see it. So out of sight, out of mind, doesn't happen very often. TVs in the bedroom.
You don't need one yet.
That's right. And actually there's an image it's very interesting that's about to come up. That's a really good point. A lot of the complaints I hear from families at conferences are that my child is so tired, but they're getting texts all night long and they don't know how to say no to that other person, and they're afraid that that person's going to be mad at them if they don't answer, and that is real. Because the feeling there is, I'm not going to be liked, and I need to be liked, and I'm going to miss something because you're making me go to sleep, Mom, how dare you? And then they're coming in like all red-rimmed eyes, and they're grouchy at you in the morning. And so what is your role if your child stopped eating? What would you try to get them to do? Eat, right? So if they're not sleeping, what can you do to help them sleep? And so sometimes just being able to be the bad guy, like the phone is going off at 9, and we're all putting our phones here, and this goes in the kitchen. And they're going to say, I use that for my alarm clock. You can still buy real alarm clocks. That's a real thing. And they even have these ones that like light up slowly, and they make like barnyard sounds. So if that's a problem in your house, creating a family solution and letting them be part of it, and then holding them accountable for what they said they were going to do without faltering. We said Monday through Friday, you better put your phone there Monday through Friday too.
And that's your consistent part. So don't ever make a plan that you don't really think you can be consistent
Yeah.
with. You'd rather not make the plan at all.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Don't, if I say we're never gonna have phones after, like that's maybe not practical in your house, don't do it. Say something that's reasonable for you to.
And that bleeds over into other areas. As soon as you say that one thing, well, if that thing didn't matter, does
That's
this
right.
thing matter? No. It's got to be real. How many devices? These are kids doing what they're supposed to be doing. 3 kids, 6 devices.
And they have their work turned in on time. So there really is no reason to say, should you have all of that?
Except, if that phone buzzes, are they going to look at it? Does that interrupt concentration? Does that interrupt reflection? Flow is disrupted. It may come as a shock. Your kid does not need you to text them at school. It's true. Glenn, is there a phone up there by your office? It works.
Quite often.
And we actually answer it.
Try that, try that.
Is there a cord coming out of it?
That's important, yeah.
And especially this time of year, kids start making their arguments for why they need the latest, newest, most technologically advanced piece of equipment possible. And they're going to say at the heart of their argument, I want you to be able to get a hold of me. You can usually do that. You can get one of those little flip phones for when they're someplace else from the dollar store, So being able to set a parameter and then stick to it as well. But realizing that at school, we promise you, if there is a problem, we promise you we will call. You don't need to text them. If you email the staff person and let them know, hey, they're going home with so-and-so, I 99.6% of the time, promise, no, I'm just kidding, they'll get to where they need to go. And so being mindful of your own inadvertent break in their concentration.
And it is easier just to text them in extended learning and say, I'm here, come on out. Then you would get to see us. So come inside. Path of least resistance. So the path of least resistance and least trouble is a mental rut already made. It requires troublesome work to undertake the alteration of old beliefs. It's like putting toothpaste back in the tube. Just put as much of it as you can back in the tube. It does take work. And if you already have habits, it's not much harm. But we believe it's work.
I think the other thing that we were commenting on is there's not a whole lot of difference between a rut and a groove. And being able to take those things that you already have and saying this is what our limit is, and as our kid, we really want you to be part of this because we want you to have a healthy balance and be a well-balanced human being. And when I envision you as an adult, this is what I see, and it's not sitting behind like a virtual bubble, like, you know, meeting people in a fictitious world. This is what I see for you. And so this is why I would like to create a balance with you. And what do you feel about that?
Involve the team or pre-team. Invite them to be part of the conversation. One thing we have learned is they will impose harsher guidelines on themselves sometimes than we would ever dream of. And so you may have to walk them back and say, no, is that really realistic? That also shows that you're listening and that you're trying to be realistic. It's not a punishment. I'm not saying you can't have this thing because it's bad, but how can we master it instead of the other way around?
I think as you begin the conversation, one strategy you might want to already think about, or have in your back pocket, is that they may come to the conversation defensive, afraid that you are about to take away their universe. That's probably not your intention whenever you're starting to set these boundaries, whether you're giving them a new device or starting to regulate the devices they have. So giving them an opportunity to diffuse a little, we call it pouring out the pitcher here. Just go, keep going. Okay, you're empty, now let's start. Because they need the opportunity to say all of their fears and feelings without feeling like that's belittled before you start with a new plan. And even writing down some of their main concerns so that you can go back to them as you set new guidelines is a really great way to show them that you're listening, that you really do want them to be part of the team. And you can also put your concerns down on that paper too so that they can see them as well.
Let them speak them a little bit.
Yeah, I was just gonna it's so difficult as an adult to have your kiddo and you're not wanting a quick fix or help. And I know the biggest thing, even having conversations with our daughters, sometimes it's like, you know, you just want me to listen or do you want some feedback? You know, because we are so used to just trying to fix their situation, and it's helping that bigger concept of what you're talking about, and so helping them find their voice. But if you're constantly fixing other problems or constantly telling them what to do, which we get to have it as adults now, it's part of the job. It's a tricky balance to learn when to listen and when to come back and support that later versus just right over there. Because sometimes they might not like what you're saying, and then that's going to prevent the next conversation when you're trying to make a pattern and set this new.
The rut and the groove. Yeah. The rut and the groove.
Yeah, whether you're writing a paper or thinking about your own epitaph, right? Begin with the end in mind. What do you want it to look like when you're an adult? Talking with them. And it can be immediate. Many of these young people are getting ready to go get jobs. You can't have your phone out at your job all the time. It's just a thing that we need to be disciplined about. And so that's an immediate consequence. But then later on, what is it going to be like when you're older? We've tried to do some modeling even with putting the blocker on the text. You can't receive text while driving. Just so that when people see, they try to text me and I'm driving, they get a response. And it says, I can't answer you right now. I'm trying to show that it really does.
It was a really huge eye-opener for me too when I did this just a little while ago after the incident in Indianapolis where the 24-year-old woman ran into 3 siblings and killed all 3 of them. That's when I was like, that's it, I'm putting it on there. And the first few days I was like, daggone, nobody's even texting me after school. I must not have any plans. And then of course, like I'd forgotten that I put that thing on there, and it knows when you're moving at a certain rate, so it automatically comes on. And I just thought nobody wanted to get a hold of me, and then of course, like when you stop it, they all ding up. But I thought that was really interesting, and at one point on one of those drives, I reached over for my phone at a stoplight, and I was like, I'll just send a quick text about going to the grocery store, and it comes up, are you driving? And I'm like, yes I am! You know, like, it was such an important, and I don't think of myself as like highly tuned into, you know, Barbara came to me today and said, oh, just text if you need anything. I'm like, I don't carry my phone. But even not being attached to it, how much I just do that automatically. It was like, are you driving? I'm like, yes! Get that away from me because it does become ingrained in what we do.
Okay. Part of it is if you, like, most adults are on their phone all the time. And, here, okay. And additionally, a lot of adults, like professional adults, are generally expected to be available way beyond, like it never stops at 5, right? So like, we have created a world where actually the limits aren't there, you know, like for most people. Do you see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And like, you know, John Woodard could never like go on vacation and be like, I'm out of the office. Like,
That's
that
a choice,
just doesn't
right?
fly
But that's a
anymore.
choice.
Well, I mean, it's a financial, I mean, it's like your paycheck, you know, like,
So is that a job that you want to be paid to do?
but,
I'm just
I
kidding.
mean, there's certain,
It's not likely that somebody's been texting in the middle of the night or calling in the middle of the night, but if they do, their life has just fallen apart, and they need to get me a bill.
right, so there's.
You know, if I'm on vacation, it doesn't matter if their child is just run over.
That's right.
They need to contact their pastor. And so we went on vacation for over Thanksgiving break, and we did this big fast where we had 30 minutes a day. We're gonna have family screen time. That's when we all did our screen time at the same time. Except I have to have my phone with me, and I don't have to respond to every text. But if I get a text, I need to check and see if it's in emergency.
And when you explained that to the other members of your family, was that something that everybody in the family agreed with? Like, this is part of our livelihood? Then I think that that's a different situation, right? Because if you're the one who is financially supporting the family and this is what has to happen within that, and there's a regulation there, and you would be willing, like, you know, if you weren't on that and one of the kids said, hey, you're actually just, I see you're playing like gemstone freeze or whatever, then you would have to be willing to put that away. But I think if you bring it to the group and say, hey, listen, I'm expecting a call, this is what I need to do, that's actually authentic communication, and that's learning how to be, right? And that's a huge difference than just saying, you guys can't have your phones, and here I am emailing Altergena. That's a really different balance. But that is actually appropriate modeling. What more could we ask for, right? You are modeling how to use technology in an effective way to keep in touch without going overboard. Of course, that's a tricky balance because who's your check and balance, you know? But I think it's important that sometimes we say, this is how we can model this in a healthy way, but not just, I do this, you don't, you know?
And to add to that, I think one of the parts that we forget is that we want to practice modeling technology use. But we, as adults with busy lives, forget to model how to be social. So like, how often do we have friends over casually for dinner as a gathering, just to hang out, play board games? Or how often do we casually go to somebody else's house as a family just to have dinner and conversation, and like that realization hit pretty hard. Like, oh, we also have to model the casual coming over friends, so that when we suggest to our teenager, why don't you have some friends over, I'll pick up some pizza? They know that's not weird to them. Like, we don't do that here, you know.
I was reflecting on when our 23-year-old would say to Glenn and I as we were visiting with her on a day that we were still kind of at work, and she'd say, are you really going to have your phones out the whole time for lunch? Like, well, you know, like, and my first go-to was, well, we're at work, you know, we still have people, but, you know, sometimes what I was doing wasn't that, you know, and then being humble to say, like, you're right, this thing that I was responding to doesn't need to be responded to right now, because we get on such a autopilot of this happens, we have to respond, and all of a sudden, we do the things that are necessary, and we go down the black hole and we're shopping for Thanksgiving, you know, whatever. So.
That's just gonna add to that, something that really hit me hard last year was children would be asking me a question and I can type really fast while watching their eyes. So I'm still kind of making eye contact, but I'm not fully present with them and they can see that. And so physically putting my hands in between my legs sometimes to stop myself and giving them eye contact and being fully present with them is so important because then they focus. Because I don't want them, you know, a teenager that I'm trying to talk to or a family member or, you know, anybody who's texting while I'm trying to have a conversation. I feel really hurt when I'm not being heard or it's not important enough to them. And they don't even realize what they're doing. And so I need to show that same respect and model for them.
It's the modeling, it's the pattern setting. If we start seeing it at age 6, then why would we ever change that at age 11? And like you said, this is our generation. This is all we have really to deal with. And so we have to do the best with what we have.
But I think that modeling, I think that modeling does go beyond just not having it out at the dinner table. I think, you know, am I on vacation? If I'm on vacation, then I'm on vacation. And showing the kids or whoever else, I actually don't have to respond to that. Most of us. You know, if I'm a doctor and someone on wait, you know, it's different. But somebody asking a question about a paper that might be due when we get back from break, I don't have to stop the world to answer every single thing that comes through. And that's a choice. Just by not having it available, I've made a choice. Am I at work or am I on vacation? I'm on vacation, okay. 15 years ago, it wasn't that long ago, 15 years ago, those problems worked themselves out without being able to get them all to me in 10 seconds.
I always laugh that Seinfeld would never be a show if cell phones were involved at all. Like, Seinfeld would not be funny, you know?
Couldn't miscommunicate off
That's right.
I was just gonna say that I'm aware that you'll probably have more data, you know, present science, whatever, and some stuff that might help some. Just wanting to know, is there a lot more for us to see? Have you all present before we ask a lot of questions?
So actually, we're finished with the presentation. We're going to be we put together a blog post that has just some links to different videos, things that you can watch or read for yourself. I think our big goal, as we really reflected upon what we wanted to do, isn't to say, don't have technology. That's not realistic. But rather, as a group, look at what just happened in an hour, right? We had this whole conversation in which we talked about our own difficulties with this, and then what we want our adults or our kids to become as they become adults, and how to start finding a balance, and doing that before your expression, the toothpaste is out of the tube, and then you're trying to squish it back in.
In the handbook, we added that place this year that talked about the the family technology plan. So there's all those resources in the handbook this year that we added just to help families try to figure out how do you create a technology plan for your family. Quite a good place to start.
Yeah, and it's not just about the technologies, but just understanding where they are. What are the needs that are being fulfilled? And what then can we do with that to offer alternatives? Because they do need to socialize. The social being was all-encompassing at 12 to 14 and 14 to 18. That's really what matters. We don't matter so much as parents anymore, at least for those few years. They'll come back to us eventually. But what their friends are doing, what their friends are wearing, what their friends say online, that's what matters.
I think one thing, one day I wrote down all the things that used to be separate when they're on a phone. It's like 30 different appliances. I mean, a flashlight, a calendar, a phone book, camera, telephone. I really shouldn't have wondered these things sometimes, you know? And but like because but you know, like a lot of these multi-tools, some of them are really usable and you might use a lot, but other ones just are not any good. And that is probably, I think, also true for a cell phone. Some things might be better.
Absolutely.
Either considered separately, like so
Like a flashlight.
you know, it's false to say this is my phone. More than that, it's almost 30 between you have at a time.
Like that
So
vacation.
It's important to appreciate how much magnetism, electromagnetism is packed. Psychic magnetism, all this is packed. So dense. Just like aura things. That's the thing in the world.
Yeah, so we just were interested as we try to kind of gather our own research as we look at this. Get a little feedback form. We might need some hints. Just out of curiosity,
You got it?
your own relationship and your relationship, you guys can fill them out together, is that okay? Yes. Or where do you see it going, especially if you have younger learners, you're not there yet, or maybe you don't have learners at all, and you just are at the school and see them.
And as we pass these out, other thoughts, brainstorming, gaps that we might attempt to fill as a group.
I just want to say it's super hard to have a teenager who doesn't have technology. I have a 16-year-old who just got a phone a couple of months ago. And she was also diagnosed with ADHD, and that's without having technology all the time. Like she had sometimes, TV and things, but like not phone. She didn't have her own computer or anything until this summer. So we had to figure out what to do with this kid, and so like we were talking about like the adrenaline and all that, how to get that fixed. So she was put in a CrossFit, and she actually gets to compete in that as well. And so like she's competing against herself and making herself better, as well as having to compete against other people and having to get all of that out that way.
How was the difficulty to find that, and was it cost prohibitive? Because I think that's something that we all run into as well. Like you've got 4 kids and 16 events, and how did that work out?
Cost is expensive, but she's on a family plan. So that was part of it. I don't know how to like incorporate all of that, but now that she has her phone, it's easier to take it away without her figuring out. Yeah, does that make sense? So we just didn't have it until like she has this group that she was starting for her school, and that was one of the reasons why we were like, okay, you can have this computer now, so you can make your website and do these things. So there was a
purpose, right? Because that's the balance, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah.
So just to see clarification, so my learner currently has volume electronic right now. Is that like individually, or is that for the entire household?
We have a game console, we control it entirely.
Oh.
Like, and Madison has a flip phone, but she doesn't touch it because I go, call me, take that to school, and I need you to call me each month. Because they don't know how to dial phones anymore.
So I think that that's a really interesting piece of data, right? So having a family console that you guys are in charge of, and then also providing a phone, and yet it's a bit, antique.
Her personal computer is.
So even just saying that, just
homework and stuff.
Yeah.
Like she didn't know that.
so you can even put with limitation, right? Because that's the
Just a little
balance.
bit there.
Yeah.
I noticed it seems like there's been a separation of like playing on a device versus, homework and research and watching educational TVs. Jackson loves to say, yeah, I've had 10 hours on the screen today. But, I've used all my screen time, but this show has bears in it. This show is educational, right?
We were grappling with this yesterday. I said, we give them so much of their work on a computer. I mean, aren't we part of
Emma
it?
uses her computer and her phone to do her homework.
Even that's true.
Yeah, even that's weird. So I mean, but I'm thinking there's certainly content is an issue, but I would imagine just how the device affects the brain. And that's hard to separate, right?
So hard. And it's very difficult now, like giving them a piece of paper. It's just so much easier. It was Saturday night, they forgot the piece of paper at school. Do I want to go through the whole thing if you forgot it at school? Or sort of be like, here it is, you can get it done on time. So there's the balance of what is convenient, and then still you're sitting in front of your phone. I don't know. That was something we definitely talked about when we were putting this together.
Yeah, I think screen time is screen time.
Yeah. Because
Regardless of
she's
content.
doing a couple hours of homework, and that's a lot on the screen, not all of it. And then she says, now can I watch a show? Well, yeah, maybe you've been doing homework all day long, right? Yeah, you can watch a show. And then she's got to catch up with her friends, and that's on Instagram. But meanwhile, she has a really good conversation at dinner, which has to leave early to go back to finish homework. And so at the end of the night, it's like.
There went 4 hours on the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the physical part of it, the wiring of the brain part. That is, I think, separate from that social need and that wanting to be in on it. know what we're talking about, that drive, those two things are separate.
It's even harder to monitor.
Yeah.
Well, and they added to that is that, it's not just like you're doing homework on your screen, it's whether you're doing homework on your screen, it's also put on the thing too.
And then they look
So
at
there's
their
multitasking on that thing, like, if you were just using your screen, like, an article and notes, then that would be one, but it's that, it's just like this start, like, once they start clicking, they just.
Yeah, turn your Spotify on so you can listen to music, and you can.
And then I have my Google Doc up and I'm just typing with that person because they know about this project too, and I'm just asking questions, but the conversation's really about 5 other things. I mean, it's just so much.
That's where kids like, oh,
So is there a way to put limits, like, on how
If you
they do
just say
their
this is
homework?
the screen time, can you print that off? I don't think, I very rarely have ever, I can't think of a time I would be like, no, you can't print that off and do it. And most of those things can be found printed in this space as well.
So she says she has a writing prompt, we can say print it off and she can write it and
Yeah,
turn it in.
absolutely. Will that always happen? I don't know. But as far as at the Highlands age, I don't think you're gonna get too much of an argument with that.
What has been funny in our house is the parent of lots of my grandchildren, the children who've been through it all the way, is they are so committed to finishing their work that you never, and the joke is like, I never thought I would be the mom that said you have to stop doing schoolwork.
Yeah.
You have to stop because it's all you're doing and you have to have some downtime. And they're like, oh, we want to keep working, but you also need a break. So, which is really weird when you have conversation with other parents because the typical teenager is like, hey, let's make their schoolwork done. Doesn't usually happen with kids who have freedom and responsibility aspects where they take their work very seriously. So telling them to put their work down and walk away from it, they're like, oh, stop.
Right, and it's not because we're actually beating them here. It's
Right, they just take it
It's
too
very
seriously. So
serious.
sometimes the screen time aspect comes into play because they're taking it too seriously and they want to get it done.
You can still put limits on that though. That can still be your parameters, but you have to put your work, like I'm gonna put let's all work for this hour and then we're gonna put that aside.
Yeah.
And then it really kind of eliminates the I'm gonna get lost down the rabbit hole of 32 YouTube videos because I saw this one thing about cats and now like cats are running and like eating cheese and it has really nothing to do about like feline rescue or whatever.
It probably happens more with the homework time than it does that.
And I think that's what's really hard because you can't monitor that and they look very busy, but really. That's right. You could look at the history.
That's right.
So
We
if
do
they
that
give
a
them-
lot
Yes.
here.
I know you guys, I think we'll just take 2 more comments and then we'll kind of wrap up in case.
I just know if you come across any research or statistics on the benefits of using the magical Wi-Fi switch to disable internet connectivity, basically, which would disable 90% of the potential multitasking BS that multitasking does not exist.
Yeah, I mean, there are all these,
That's just-
I also know someone who has like an app that they can control
Yeah.
from their room
Yep.
that says, hey, we agreed that bedtime was 9:30, and that app just slows their kid's computer down, and then she has it set so it's an alarm, and it comes back up on at like 6 a.m. so that they can get the alarm, but it just shuts her phone down and just says, good night, and that's it. Like, you can do that as a parent.
Well, let's take the damn point.
You can, right?
That's-
Yeah, we can. But for some, it's about the kid wants to still be able to hold it. And so you don't want to have this, I'm taking it away from you. Instead, like, this is going to be what our agreement is until you're ready to demonstrate your own level of responsibility. Again, it's about setting boundaries and then holding true to them. Yes.
You can take away someone's phone and then be their alarm.
You could. That would also require the parent has to get up earlier, which would be their own punishment. I like where you're going with that. It's good. It's clever thinking. So you guys can leave these on your way out and we'll stick around a little. I know some people have things to go do. We really appreciate your time and willingness to come talk about this topic. We think it's really important. If you have suggestions or your own dilemmas, feel free to email really any of your staff members, but certainly us as well. We're always open to offering resources or just listening. Like, can we brainstorm a solution? There may not be one, but sometimes just being able to share helps to feel like you're not like, oh my gosh, I just have to let them do this or they're going to scream and cry. So thank you for taking your time to be here this evening, and you can just leave those there if you want, and we'll see you soon.
I'll be having a lesson.
Oh, yeah, yeah, definitely.